He always helped his neighbor carry groceries. One day she left him a note that changed everything. Every Tuesday, like clockwork, Marcus would see Mrs. Chen struggling with her grocery bags, 4 flights of stairs, arthritic hands, a slight frame that seemed to shrink with each passing year. You might walk past someone like her without a second thought. We all do. The invisible elderly, carrying their burdens in silence while the world rushes by. But Marcus stopped. Every single time. What makes someone notice the unnoticed? What turns a stranger into a guardian angel who doesn't even know they're wearing wings? The first time was an accident. He was coming home from work, exhausted, mind full of deadlines and disappointments. She was on the second landing, catching her breath, 3 heavy bags threatening to spill their contents down the concrete steps. Their eyes met. In that fraction of a second, something passed between them that words could never capture. A recognition. A shared humanity. A silent plea met with an unspoken promise. "Let me help you with those," he said, already reaching for the bags before she could protest. She smiled. Not the polite smile we give strangers, but something deeper. Something that remembered what kindness used to feel like when the world was younger, and people still looked each other in the eyes. From that day forward, Tuesday became their day. He would wait by the entrance, pretending to check his mail, watching for her small figure to round the corner with her shopping cart. She never asked. He never offered. It simply became what they did, this dance of giving and receiving that required no words, no contracts, no expectations. Some would call it a small thing. Carrying groceries. 10 minutes out of a week. But what if the smallest acts are actually the largest? What if the entire universe pivots on these tiny moments of choice? You learn a lot about someone by what they carry. Not just in their bags, but in their eyes, their shoulders, the way they hold their head when they think no one is watching. Mrs. Chen's bags told stories. Cat food for Mr. Whiskers, the tabby who was her only companion since her husband passed. Tea leaves from the Asian market across town. The expensive kind she probably shouldn't spend money on but did anyway because some luxuries feed the soul more than the body. Marcus noticed the details. How she always bought the same brand of crackers. How the bags got lighter over the months not because she was buying less but because she was choosing cheaper, smaller items. How she started buying generic medications instead of name brands. Poverty creeps in like fog, silent and encompassing. You don't see it coming until you're already lost in it. But here's what struck him most. She never complained. Not once. While his co-workers grumbled about their coffee being too cold or their bonuses being too small, Mrs. Chen climbed those stairs with quiet dignity, grateful for help, but never expecting it. What does it mean to truly see someone? Not just look at them, but see into them, past the carefully maintained exterior to the truth beneath? Week after week, their routine continued. Sometimes they talked. About the weather, about Mr. Whiskers, about the new family that moved in on the 3rd floor. Sometimes they climbed in comfortable silence, the only sound their synchronized breathing and the rustle of plastic bags. She started making him cookies, small ones, barely sweet, the kind that spoke of rationed sugar and stretched budgets. He accepted them like they were made of gold, because in a way they were. They were made of something more precious than money. They were made of connection. One Tuesday, she wasn't there. Marcus waited 30 minutes, then an hour. The mail had long been checked, rechecked, sorted through twice. Finally, he climbed to the 4th floor and knocked on her door. "Mr. Whiskers" meowed from inside, but no one answered. Fear has a taste. Metallic, sharp, immediate. It floods your mouth when you realize someone you care about might be in trouble. Marcus knocked again, harder this time. Called her name. The cat's meowing grew more insistent, almost frantic. That's when he noticed it. The door was unlocked. You make choices in life that define who you are, not the big dramatic ones everyone talks about. The small ones. The ones where you decide whether to walk away or walk in. He pushed the door open. The apartment was tiny, immaculate despite its age. Doilies on every surface. Photographs of a younger Mrs. Chen with a handsome man in a military uniform. A life lived in sepia tones and careful preservation. She was on the kitchen floor, conscious but unable to get up. Her hip, she explained, between tears of frustration more than pain. She'd been there for hours, reaching for the phone that had fallen just beyond her grasp. Have you ever seen pride crumble? It's like watching a sandcastle meet the tide. Inevitable, heartbreaking, and somehow beautiful in its humanity. Marcus called the ambulance, rode with her to the hospital, held her hand while they examined her. No break, thank God, but a severe sprain that would require weeks of recovery, weeks of not being able to climb stairs, weeks of depending on others. "I have no one," she whispered, and those 3 words carried the weight of an entire life. Children who lived too far away, too busy with their own lives. Friends who had passed on, one by one, like lights going out in a long hallway. A society that forgets its elders the moment they stop being productive. "You have me," Marcus said, and he meant it. Sometimes we make promises we don't fully understand until we're living them. The next weeks became a blur of hospital visits, physical therapy appointments, grocery runs, not just with her, but for her. He met Mr. Whiskers, who turned out to be as dignified and reserved as his owner. He learned where she kept her medications, how she liked her tea, which bills were due when. You think you're helping someone else, but what if they're actually helping you? What if every act of service is really an act of self-discovery? Compassion is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it grows. But like any workout, it changes you in ways you don't expect. Marcus's life began to reorganize itself around Tuesday visits that became Thursday visits that became daily check-ins. His friends noticed. His girlfriend definitely noticed. "You're spending all your free time with some old lady you barely know," she said. Not cruelly, but with the bewilderment of someone who measures relationships by what they can get rather than what they can give. How do you explain that sometimes obligation transforms into opportunity? That duty can become devotion, that in serving others we discover parts of ourselves we never knew existed? Mrs. Chen, for her part, fought the help every step of the way. Pride is often the last thing we're willing to surrender, even when it's the first thing we should. She tried to pay him. He refused. She tried to minimize her needs. He saw through it. She tried to pretend she was getting better faster than she was. He knew better. But here's what's beautiful about persistence and kindness. It wears down walls like water on stone. Slowly, grudgingly, she began to accept not just his help, but his friendship. They developed routines within routines. Tuesday was still grocery day, but now it included a stop at the park where she would sit on a bench while he shopped, watching the pigeons and remembering when she used to chase them as a girl in Beijing. Thursday became soup day. She would make a huge pot and insist he take half home, not realizing or perhaps not caring that he was buying the ingredients. She told him stories about meeting her husband during the war, about coming to America with nothing but hope in a suitcase, about building a life from scratch in a country that wasn't always kind to people who looked like her. What treasures do we miss when we don't listen to our elders? What libraries of wisdom do we let burn because we're too busy to sit and hear their stories? Marcus's girlfriend left him, said he'd changed, become boring, spent too much time caring about people who couldn't give him anything back. She wasn't wrong about him changing, but she was wrong about everything else. Because Mrs. Chen was giving him something invaluable. She was teaching him that love isn't a transaction. It's a transformation. Time moves differently when you're truly present with someone. Days blend into weeks, weeks into months, and suddenly you realize that strangers have become family. Spring arrived like a tentative guest, unsure of its welcome. Mrs. Chen's hip healed, slowly but surely. She could manage the stairs again, though Marcus still insisted on carrying the heavy bags. Some habits once formed from necessity continue from love. But something else was happening. Something neither of them talked about, but both of them felt. She was getting weaker in other ways, forgetting things, repeating stories not out of fondness, but from a mind beginning to fray at the edges. Have you ever watched someone you love start to disappear while they're still standing right in front of you? It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The harder you grip, the faster it flows away. Marcus started leaving notes, reminders about medications, Mr. Whiskers' feeding schedule, which bills had been paid. He laminated emergency contact cards and put them by every phone. He organized her photos into albums with labels, trying to anchor her memories before they drifted away entirely. She knew what was happening. The lucid days were the hardest, when she could see her own decline like watching a movie of someone else's life. On those days, she would pat his hand and say, "You're a good boy, Marcus. Such a good boy." The roles had reversed so gradually neither of them noticed until it was complete. The helper had become the helped. The guardian had become the guarded. And somehow, that felt exactly right. One Tuesday, always a Tuesday, as if that day held special magic, she was particularly clear, sharp even, like the fog had lifted completely if only for a moment. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "I've been writing letters." She pulled out a shoebox, worn at the corners, held together with rubber bands. Inside were envelopes, dozens of them, each labeled with a date. "For after," she said simply, as if after was just another destination on a map they both could see. "What do you say when someone hands you their future absence, when they trust you with their own ending? We think we understand gratitude until someone shows us what it really looks like. Not the polite thank yous we scatter like birdseed, but the kind that reshapes the very air around it." The letters sat in Marcus's apartment like a presence. He didn't open them. Couldn't. They were for after, she'd said, and he wasn't ready for after. Maybe we're never ready for after, but life has its own timeline, indifferent to our preferences. Mrs. Chen's good days became fewer, her confused days more frequent. She started calling him by her son's name, started seeing her long-dead husband in the corners of rooms, started forgetting to eat unless reminded. The system kicked in as systems do: social workers, doctors, evaluations. Words like capacity and placement and level of care floating around her apartment like vultures circling something not quite dead yet. Marcus fought them all, became her fiercest advocate, her translator not of language but of humanity. He sat in meetings where they discussed her like she wasn't there, reducing a whole life to checkboxes and care levels. He reminded them of her name, her stories, her dignity. But how long can one person hold back the tide? How many fingers can you put in the dam before the whole thing breaks? The day came when she didn't recognize him at all. Not even as her son or husband or anyone from her carefully catalogued past. He was just a stranger, and she was frightened of strangers. She screamed when he tried to help her, pressed herself against the wall like he was there to hurt her rather than help her. That's when he knew. Love sometimes means letting go. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is step back and let others step in. The facility was nice as these places go. Clean, well lit, staff who seemed to care. He visited every day at first, then every other day when it became clear his presence upset her more than comforted her. Mr. Whiskers came to live with him, adapting to his new home with the stoic grace of a cat who'd seen too much to be surprised by change. On good days, she would smile at him without recognition but with instinctive trust. On bad days, she didn't see him at all. On the worst days, she cried for people long gone and places that existed only in the geography of memory. Grief is a strange companion. It arrives before death, settles in like it's paying rent, rearranges all your furniture when you're not looking. Marcus kept up the routines even though she wasn't there to share them. Tuesday groceries, Thursday soup. He bought the same crackers she used to buy, fed Mr. Whiskers the same food at the same time, kept her photos dusted and arranged. Why do we maintain rituals for people who can no longer appreciate them? Maybe because the rituals were never really for them. Maybe they were always for us, teaching us how to love through action rather than just feeling. The facility called less frequently as she settled into whatever world her mind had created for her. A world where her husband was still alive, where her children were still young, where she was still the strong one others depended on. Perhaps a kinder world than the one she'd left behind. Marcus started reading the letters, one each Tuesday, as if she were still there to hand them to him. They weren't what he expected. No great revelations, no deathbed confessions, just observations, gratitude, stories he'd heard before but told from her perspective. "Today you carried my groceries," one began, "but really you carried my heart. It had gotten so heavy, you see, so full of loss and fear and the terrible weight of being forgotten. You made it light again." Another. "You think you were helping me, dear boy, but I was the one helping you. I was teaching you the secret, that we save ourselves by saving others. That the only antidote to meaninglessness is connection. That small acts of love are rebel yells against the indifference of the universe." Page after page, letter after letter, she had documented not just their friendship but the philosophy it had taught her. The way kindness compounds like interest. The way attention from one person can make you feel seen by the whole world. The way love doesn't need blood or history or even much time, it just needs presence. What mirrors do we become for each other? What truth do we reflect that the other person can't see on their own? There's a moment in every profound relationship where you realize you've been changed at the cellular level, that who you were before and who you are now are separated by an uncrossable distance. Marcus found himself looking for other Mrs. Chens. They were everywhere once you started seeing them. The elderly man at the bus stop who counted coins with shaking hands. The woman at the laundromat who struggled with heavy detergent bottles. The veteran in the wheelchair trying to navigate curbs built for legs that worked. He started small. A door held here. A bag carried there. Brief conversations that reminded people they existed. They mattered. They were seen. He learned their names, their stories, their needs. Is this how movements begin? Not with grand gestures, but with the multiplication of tiny ones? One person helping another, inspiring a third, creating ripples that spread far beyond the original stone's throw? Mrs. Chen's letters became his guide. She had written about the ripple effect, about how his kindness to her had made her kinder to others, how she had started checking on the young mother downstairs, sharing her cookies with the mail carrier, calling the lonely woman from her church. "We think love is scarce," she wrote, "so we hoard it like Depression-era survivors saving string. But love is the only thing that multiplies when you give it away, the only investment with guaranteed returns." Marcus organized the neighbors, created a buddy system for the elderly residents, started a grocery collective where the younger people helped the older ones shop. Simple things, obvious things, things that should have existed all along but didn't, because everyone was waiting for someone else to start. The building began to change. Doors that had stayed closed for years opened. People who had lived side by side without speaking became friends. The hallways filled with conversation, laughter, the sound of feet moving with purpose rather than just passing through. What happens when a building stops being just a structure and becomes a community? When neighbors stop being strangers and become family? Truth arrives in its own time, wearing disguises we don't expect. Sometimes it looks like loss, sometimes like love, sometimes like a note slipped under a door on an ordinary Tuesday. The facility called on a Wednesday, always the unexpected days that carry the expected news. Mrs. Chen had passed peacefully in her sleep, they said. No pain, no struggle, just a gentle stepping from one room to the next. Marcus sat with the news, letting it settle into his bones. Strange how you can prepare for something every day and still be surprised when it arrives. Strange how absence can feel like presence, how ending can feel like beginning. He was listed as her emergency contact, her power of attorney, her executor. All roles she had assigned without telling him, documented in careful legal language that made their relationship official in the eyes of a world that needed paper to believe in love. The funeral was small, a few distant relatives who arrived guilty and left relieved, some neighbors from the building, the mail carrier, the grocery store clerk who always saved the good vegetables for her, a constellation of lives she had touched without trying. But it was afterward that the real surprise came. The lawyer, crisp and efficient, laying out papers like a dealer spreading cards. She had left everything to Marcus. Not much in monetary terms, her savings depleted by medical costs, her possessions modest, but there was one thing, an envelope, sealed, with instructions not to open it until he was home alone on a Tuesday. Why do final wishes feel like first commandments? Why do the last words carry more weight than all the ones that came before? Marcus waited. Sunday crawled, Monday lingered, Tuesday arrived like a hesitant friend. He sat in his apartment, Mr. Whiskers purring on his lap, and opened the envelope with hands that barely shook. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small key. The paper had just one line in her careful handwriting. "Look under the loose floorboard in my closet. Thank you for seeing me." Discovery is a form of archaeology. We dig through layers of time and circumstance to find treasures we didn't know were buried. The floorboard was exactly where she said it would be. Loose enough to lift with gentle pressure, hiding a space that held a small metal box. The key fit perfectly, as keys do when they're meant for specific locks, specific moments, specific revelations. Inside the box, money. Not a fortune, but not nothing. Tens and 20s and 50s folded carefully, smelling of time and sacrifice. And another note. "This is every dollar you ever spent on me. Every grocery bill, every taxi to the doctor, every soup ingredient. I kept track, you see. Pride is a funny thing. It wouldn't let me accept charity, but love found a way to make it not charity at all, just a loan between friends, now repaid. But there was more. Under the money, wrapped in tissue paper like something precious, was a photograph. Mrs. Chen is a young woman, radiant, standing next to her husband in his uniform. And behind the photograph, one more letter. "My dear Marcus," it began. "By now you know my secret. I was never poor, not in the way you thought. I had enough. More than enough. But I had forgotten something more important than money. I had forgotten I mattered. I had forgotten that someone seeing me, helping me, caring about me was worth more than all the bank accounts in the world. You gave me back my dignity by letting me need you. You gave me purpose by letting me love you back. You taught me that independence isn't about doing everything alone. It's about choosing who we depend on and letting them choose us in return. The money is yours not as payment but as possibility. Use it to see others the way you saw me. Use it to start something that outlasts both of us. Use it to prove that kindness is not weakness, but the greatest strength humans possess. I am gone but not absent. Every time you help someone carry their burdens, I am there. Every time you see the invisible, I am watching. Every time you choose connection over comfort, I am proud. Thank you for the Tuesdays. Thank you for the groceries. Thank you for showing an old woman that she still had something to give by having so much to receive. All my love now and always, Mrs. Chen." What do we do with inheritance that isn't about money but about mission? How do we carry forward someone's legacy when that legacy is as simple and complicated as kindness? Purpose, once discovered, is impossible to ignore. It sits in your chest like a second heartbeat, demanding attention, demanding action, demanding that you become who you were always meant to be. Marcus used the money to start small. A fund for neighbors facing emergency expenses. A meal program for seniors who couldn't cook anymore. A transportation network for doctor's appointments. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would make the news. Just quiet kindness multiplying in the shadows where real change happens. But here's what's beautiful about goodness. It's contagious. Other people started contributing. Time, money, skills. The young mother from downstairs began teaching computer skills to seniors. The veteran started a workshop fixing things for people who couldn't afford repairs. The mail carrier began checking on residents who hadn't collected their mail. The building became a model. Other buildings noticed. The city noticed. What started as one man carrying groceries became a movement of people carrying each other. You want to know the secret of changing the world? It's not complicated. You start with one person. You see them. Really see them. You help them carry whatever they're carrying, and then you do it again and again, until seeing and helping become as natural as breathing. Mrs. Chen's apartment was eventually rented to a young couple. Marcus helped them move in, told them about the woman who used to live there. They listened with the polite attention of people hearing ancient history. But later, he saw them helping their elderly neighbor with his trash, the ripples continuing to spread. Mr. Whiskers lived to be ancient in cat years, dignified to the end. When his time came, Marcus buried him with one of Mrs. Chen's letters, the one about how love multiplies. It seemed fitting. Even cats understand that truth in their own way. Years passed. The program grew. Awards were won, articles were written, none of which mattered as much as the moment when someone realized they weren't invisible anymore. When someone discovered they could be both helped and helper. When someone learned that dignity isn't about independence but about interdependence. What monuments do we build with our lives? Some are made of marble and bronze. Others are made of moments and memories and the countless times we choose to stop and help someone carry their load. Every ending is also a beginning. Every goodbye carries within it the seed of all the hellos that follow. Every act of love teaches others how to love. Marcus is older now, his hair gray where it used to be brown, his steps slower but still purposeful. He lives in the same building, in the same apartment, surrounded by different neighbors who've become family the same way Mrs. Chen did. He still shops on Tuesdays, still makes soup on Thursdays, still looks for the invisible people, the ones carrying burdens too heavy for their frames. But now he's not alone. The whole building watches, the whole neighborhood, a network of people who understand that community isn't about proximity, but about promise. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, he reads her letters again. They've grown soft with handling, precious with time. Her words have become prophecy, her hope has become reality, her love has become legacy. We save ourselves by saving others. She wrote it, but he lived it, and in living it, taught others to live it too, a chain of kindness stretching forward and backward through time, each link forged by choice, strengthened by practice, polished by gratitude. You might think this is just a story about groceries, about an old woman and a young man and a few bags carried up some stairs, but you'd be wrong. This is a story about the universe bending toward justice one small act at a time, about humanity revealing itself in the space between need and response, about love being not a feeling, but a decision made over and over until it becomes who you are. What note will you leave under someone's door? What groceries will you help carry? What invisible person will you choose to see? Because here's the truth Mrs. Chen knew. We're all carrying something heavy. We're all climbing stairs that seem too steep. We're all hoping someone will notice, will stop, will help. And when they do, when you do, you don't just change their life, you change your own. You discover that strength isn't about what you can carry alone, but about what we can carry together. You learn that the smallest acts create the biggest changes. You understand that love isn't scarce. It's abundant, waiting to be multiplied by every hand that reaches out to help. Look around. Someone near you is struggling with their groceries right now. Their burdens might be physical or emotional or spiritual, but they're real and they're heavy and they're waiting for someone like you to notice. Will you be their Marcus? Will they be your Mrs. Chen? Will you both discover that in helping each other, you're really helping yourselves become who you were meant to be? The answer is in your hands. It always has been. It always will be. Pick up the groceries. Climb the stairs. Change the world. One Tuesday at a time. Like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. This channel is for those who believe in the power of small acts.